Hello everyone, warm welcome to my channel. I'm so glad to have you here. In this video, I'd like to share some tips for those of you planning to visit Morocco. Things that you should keep in mind before and during your trip. I've decided to split my tips into two parts, two videos, just to keep them short and concise. The first part is dedicated to just general advice overall, and the second one will be a little bit more specific and all about staying in Medina or Old Town. Because not all things that apply to Medina will be relevant to other places, for example, modern parts of a town or less touristy locations. In fact, they're quite different and you may have a completely different experience. So that's why I've decided to put these tips into separate parts. So, without keeping you waiting, let's go through the tips that I've prepared for you. And the first tip is actually what you are already doing, which is conduct thorough research. Always make enough research before going on vacation, and that applies to any country you are visiting. The more information you get, the better. You always have to make sure that you are well prepared and know what to expect. For example, make sure to check the transportation options in advance. This is very important. Check how and when they operate and if there are any local mobile applications you can use, for instance, a taxi service or others. The next thing is properly check the locations you are going to visit. And here I mean, don't just simply make a list of attractions you'd like to see, but also check their opening days and hours for the dates of your trip, because they may be closed due to various reasons, such as renovation, or might have shorter operational hours or even be completely closed on certain days due to different events or national holidays. Which brings me to my next point. Always verify if there are any national holidays or significant events in the country that you're going to visit. For instance, when it comes to Morocco, people always tell you that you need to know when there is going to be Ramadan. Ramadan is the sacred month for Muslims, is the time for fasting, prayer and introspection. During that month, you'll find most of the shops and restaurants closed in the mornings and during the daytime. Also, a lot of activities and services can operate on a very different schedule, so you need to be aware of the changes and be prepared if you are planning to travel during Ramadan. Up next, try to make a research, even a small one, about approximate prices for different services in the city you are visiting. This can help you manage and save money, ensuring that you don't fall victim to scams or pay inflated tourist prices. And of course, be aware of general things that you should or should not do in that particular place. And finally, make sure to watch or read a variety of different sources about all of that, as information may vary or there can always be some extra tips. And even after you watch my video, of course, I strongly suggest that you explore other content on this topic where you may be offered some additional information. Tip number 2. Do not rely on English in Morocco. If you're going to Morocco, it would be very useful to learn at least a little bit of French or Arabic if it's not too difficult for you. Because many people in Morocco, outside of your hotel or riad, don't speak English, especially in less touristy areas. The primary languages in Morocco are Moroccan Arabic, Standard Arabic, Amazigh or Berber languages that can vary depending on the region, and French. It also can be Spanish in some towns in the north like Chefchaouen or Tangier, but in most cases, and so far everyone we met spoke French. So knowing even just very basics would be a great help and save you a lot of hassle. If learning another language is not an option for you, make sure to prepare a voice translator on your phone. it may not be always very accurate, but it still can be helpful, because while you can simply text what you want to say on your written translator, you still need to understand what you are being told by the locals. Tip number 3. Before your trip, make sure to book your accommodation through reliable sources only. We actually had a pretty rough time because we booked some accommodations through a company that turned out to be unreliable. We found a riad on Google, and that company through which we could book the riad was on the list of recommended by Google. And not only was it featured at the very top, but they also had a pretty good deal. And here is the name of the company. We had never tried it before and had our doubts, but then again, it was on the list and we thought that maybe it should be trustworthy. So we decided to try, and we got a problem with that company. We arrived to one of the riads in Morocco, and the first thing we were told is that there was no booking under our names, and it was so stressful because it was a late night, we were extremely tired, and our money had already been taken, which was the most worrying part. We spent several hours trying to contact the customer service, which was really problematic to say the least. And every time we were told that no, our booking was on the system. And then the riad's manager was showing us on their computer that there was in fact no record of our booking and no payment had been received. And the big problem was also communication itself, because the management spoke little English and they couldn't really talk to the company directly either. More than that, the riad actually said that they had stopped business with that company a long time ago. So it was such a strange situation. Later we discovered that there were some intermediaries between the primary company and the accommodations, and they seemed to have caused numerous mixed-ups. I honestly don't know all the details, but we also paid for another accommodation through the same company, and that booking was missing as well. It was all eventually resolved, but we spent a lot of nerves and time on dealing with that. So yeah, book your accommodation through reliable sources only, and check what other people recommend, especially if you go to a place where there can be a language barrier, and it's even harder to be solving this sort of issues. The next tip is bring certain items with you in advance. There's certain items that would be very useful to bring with you to Morocco, so that you don't need to spend your time shopping once you are there, unless you have a shopping center close to your accommodation, of course. I've put together a small list. It's pretty simple, but sometimes we may forget even the essentials. For example, in my case, I didn't bring my own hairdryer to Morocco because every time we travel to somewhere, there is usually always a hairdryer provided in a room, so I completely forgot about it during our packing. Anyway, I've already made a separate video listing the essentials that you should bring with you, so that I don't put everything into one video, otherwise it would be too long, so you can watch it if you'd like. Tip number 5. Bind your clothing. Although in general tourists are not obligated to wear specific clothes, it's very important to dress relatively modestly and be respectful to the culture, especially if you are a girl. I think it's a great mutual respect. On one hand, there is no obligation, but on the other hand, you also pay some effort to understand and honor the traditions and values of the place you are visiting. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just a bit of mindfulness about local customs can be so much appreciated. For example, open legs, chest or belly is generally not a good idea, as it can draw too much attention, even though no one will probably tell you anything. And it's not very respectful in my opinion. I also heard that ideally shoulders should be covered too, and you should have at least some sort of sleeves. Luckily, there are plenty of fashionable choices out there that don't reveal too much skin but are very comfortable to wear. For example, long flowy dresses, skirts, or loose airy trousers are a very good option for women. Not only do they look appropriate, but also if you choose the right fabric and design, you will actually feel so fresh and protect your skin from the sun. I was personally wearing Moroccan kaftans most of the time, and I got a lot of compliments, and I especially liked those from lovely local women. I love kaftans. They are so beautiful and comfortable, and there are so many different designs. Of course, you need to choose the right one, as you probably wouldn't go out in something sophisticated, sparkling under the sun from every angle. And in fact, most of women in Morocco don't wear kaftans on a daily basis. They are usually used for special occasions like celebrations and festivals. But it's fine to wear a kaftan as a tourist, and I personally couldn't visit Morocco and simply have ordinary clothes which I could wear anywhere else. Also, if you have a kaftan on, it's very convenient for taking photos as you're all dressed perfectly for the location. But of course, you can go for any dresses or any clothes that look appropriate. As for men, the guidelines are a bit more relaxed as long as you are not walking with an open shirt or naked torso. It should be fine. Although I also heard that it would be a little bit more respectful to wear longer light pants instead of shorts, and maybe avoid completely sleeveless tops as well. Moving on to tip number 6. Once in Morocco, be aware of taxi scams. Now, about transport, I'd like to talk a bit more about it because although I absolutely love Morocco, taxi was one of the most disappointing things we've experienced there, and this is definitely something you should know about. While there are public buses in big cities, I think that taxi is still the most popular transport in Morocco, and very often you won't really have other options apart from getting a taxi. They're actually really cheap, and local people take it all the time, just as often as we would probably take a bus. However, in most of the places we visited, especially in popular bigger cities like Marrakech, Fez and Tangier, the price of a taxi for tourists was substantially higher. A lot of drivers will try to get the best they can out of your wallet, so you have to keep that in mind and be careful. Apart from Rabat, which is the whole another story, taxi drivers do not normally use a meter. They either don't have it or refuse to use it, and just make up their own price, which can go multiple times higher of the original local price. There are two types of taxi, petit or small and a grand taxi. Petit ones operate within a city or town, and grand taxi normally drive longer distances from one town to another and pick up multiple people, so you are paying only for a seat. However, petit taxi drivers often charge by a number of people too, as they usually pick up more people on the way, pretty much like a grand taxi. We took a taxi so many times throughout our trip, and most of the time we had to share it with local people, so I can surely say that taxi in fact is very cheap. Now, I highly suggest that you do not accept the price you're offered in the first place, and do your best to bargain as much as you can, because taxi scam has become a really big problem in Morocco, and apparently it's getting worse. For example, in Marrakech, you will be very often asked to pay 50 Moroccan dirhams or even more for a distance that local people would be charged at least 5 times less. We even had cases when taxi drivers wanted to charge us 10 times more. It was very unpleasant to say the least. The first couple of days we didn't really know the local prices and took a taxi a couple of times without much bargaining, But then we met some really lovely local people who pointed out that we'd been excessively overcharged and that we mustn't pay that much. Taxi drivers get used to easy money very quickly, and it's getting harder and harder for tourists to drop the price, especially in Marrakesh. A lot of drivers would prefer to wait for the next catch or a tourist who would pay a lot rather than take a couple of driving requests for a cheaper price. I'm not even talking about the real price. And I must say that there are dozens and dozens of tourists every day who pay the amounts they are asked for, which makes this scam only prosper. So please don't accept these prices. It's not fair. I heard that someone said that it's okay to pay more as a tourist because income of most people in Morocco isn't high. I personally don't understand how it is justified. First of all, it is a scam. Overcharging is deceptive everywhere. It's not an official fare for tourists that is clearly stated by authorities. It's just someone wanting to take advantage of you, and just because it becomes so ubiquitous in touristy cities, it doesn't mean that it's okay. Secondly, not all people who travel to Morocco necessarily have a much higher income. There are plenty of people who don't earn much either, but still want to travel. Maybe it's their long-time savings. So no, it's not fair to pay to someone else's pocket just because you are a tourist. Not to mention how many more times you are actually overpaying. What is fair though is to leave good tips if someone is nice and honest. And we did it a lot when we met people like that. Because it's not really about money or any amount, it's about fairness and genuine respect, which you don't feel when people treat you this way. So there are a couple of tips I could give you that may help when it comes to taxi scams. Firstly, it's a good idea to ask local people, for example, staff in restaurants or even just someone on the street, how much approximately a taxi can cost in a particular area or for a particular distance. They don't benefit from lying to you. They are not getting anything from it, so you will likely get the right information. I don't recommend asking staff in your riad or a hotel, however. While you can do that just out of curiosity, they may not provide you with the most accurate information because most of riads offer and promote their own transport, especially to a lot of touristy places. And of course, they set their own price that is profitable for them. So it can happen that they may try to discourage you from taking a taxi on the street altogether and offer their own transport that won't be any cheaper. Well, in that case, at least it is their official fare. But most of the time, it's not worth it, to be honest. It's only convenient to get this service if you need transport in the middle of the night or at any other inconvenient time, and you need it to be really quick, efficient, and with the least amount of stress. Another small tip is to find a local taxi application on the phone in each town. It's important to note that in Morocco, different cities can support different apps, so you'll need to make a little research, but it's not that hard, to be honest. The truth is, apart from Casablanca or Rabat, where there is generally a much better situation with transport, it's very unlikely that you will actually be able to get a taxi through those applications because it's not very common to order a taxi online, and most people get it on the street. But that's not why we need the application. You can use it to check the approximate price for a distance you need, so that you are at least aware of it once you stop a taxi on the street. You probably won't be able to pay that price anyway because a lot of drivers will simply refuse, but at least you can decide how much you can bargain. Also, always remember, taxi is very popular in Morocco, and unless you are in a rush or in a very remote area, it's very easy to get it. There are so many taxis around, you will see them all the time, every minute, so don't be afraid to say no and just move on to the next taxi if you are not happy with the price. Just keep asking. I also once saw someone's tip on the internet saying that you can even ask local people on the street to catch a taxi for you if all taxis around are trying to drastically overcharge you. We've never tried it ourselves, but I'm sure that there will be plenty of kind local people who'd be happy to help and drop the price for you. Also, I must mention one very important thing. Do not sit in a taxi without confirming the price first. It's very important. Always do it before the trip, not after. Now, I'd like to say that even though taxi scam is very popular in Marrakesh, Tangier and Fez, not all places in Morocco are like that. I will talk about taxi more in my upcoming videos where I'll be covering every individual place we visited, because in other towns the situation was different. And that was a very long and detailed tip, but I really want to inform and help other travelers, because I was surprised to find out that a lot of people were overpaying during their trip and they didn't even know about that, even though they felt that something was definitely wrong. Now let's move on to the next tip, and that is check ratings of restaurants. When you are traveling, it's always smart to take a minute and do a quick Google check on a restaurant rating before entering it. Even if you are very, very hungry, I probably wouldn't recommend rushing into a random place you see. Although not always 100% accurate, most of the time reviews don't lie. If there are options, I strongly suggest to pick up a place over 4 stars, not lower. If a place has lots of positive feedback, it's usually good, and if it doesn't, well, there is a reason. We check the rating very often, and sometimes we didn't have a chance to have a meal in a good rated place. For example, we simply didn't have time to look for something else, or there weren't many options around. And yes, the reviews weren't lying. Usually, if a place had a good rank, nearly every time we really enjoyed the food, and vice versa. So yeah, take your time and check the rating. Nowadays, it's so easy to check and confirm everything on the internet. And there is another small tip. Not every good-looking restaurant is great, and not every humble place that looks pretty plain is just okay. You can be really surprised how delicious the food can be in the simplest places that you would probably overlook in the first place. That's why these reviews help so much, and sometimes people even mention their favorite dishes in those reviews, which is always a bonus. And these were my general tips for your trip to Morocco. In my next video, I will be covering Medina, or Old Town, and I will be giving you some more tips and advice for that specifically, and what you should be aware of, because it can be pretty tricky. So have a wonderful day, stay happy, healthy and curious, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!